Hello there, boys and birds. It is I, Adam Cleary, back again after a really long week off with another hot, fried, delicious slice of your hashtag good afternoons, joined as ever by Housewife's favourite, Adam Nicholas. And coming up for you today, do you remember the Raw 25th anniversary? What a dog pile that was. Well, I'll be telling you which big superstars have been shooting on it over the weekend.
Oh, that sounds interesting, but not quite as interesting as Alexa Bliss wanting to see more women in the main event for WWE shows. And on top of that, we also have an even more interesting bit of news where Ariane Andrew tells the biggest differences between WWE and AEW. Ooh, tasty stuff.
Oh, that does sound interesting, Adam Nicholas, but unfortunately not as interesting as our lead story today. And would you all at home like to guess for me how many WWE wrestlers have allegedly been in contact with AEW about securing some work in that promotion after their time in the big leagues has finally finished? Some of you might guess 10, that's a reasonable number. 20, the upper reaches 30 perhaps. And I'm here to tell you that no, the correct answer, according to Big Banter Uncle Dave at the Wrestling Observer newsletter, is all of them except for Roman Reigns. That is right, according to Dave Meltzer. Every single WWE performer, small brackets, except for the big dog Roman Reigns, has at some time or other been in contact with AEW about just if there's any room for them down there. If they were to leave WWE one day, would they be able to go work there? If their contract was to run out, would they be able to go and work there? Were they to be fired in the middle of a global health crisis, thus rendering them unemployable and unable to work anywhere else in the world, would they then be able to pick up the reins, no pun intended, down in AEW? Now, of course, we've seen Matt Cardona. He's recently gone there. FTR, they've recently gone there. And while AEW insists that they are not looking to pick up every single person who leaves WWE, they are also open to the possibility that any major wrestler could improve their business prospects. So, rule absolutely nobody out, except, of course, Adam Nicholas, for Roman Reigns.
For Roman Reigns, the man who literally wears the brand on his back, but has wisely decided not to be there during all of this madness, because he's a good dog. Anyway, let's move on to our next story for the day, shall we? Because Alexa Bliss has been talking about what she wants to see happening with WWE shows. Now, she was talking to Table Talk and has basically spoken about the fact that she wants more women to be wrestling in the main event of WWE shows. And, of course, rightly so. She said, it's time to have more women as main eventers and see how that goes. She says the women's evolution has done amazing things and it was a great accomplishment for every woman in the company, for us, to be main eventing WrestleMania, of course referring to the Becky, Ronda and Charlotte main event at WrestleMania 35. Interestingly though, all three of those people, of course, are now on some form of sabbatical from the company, which you kind of think might hinder the sort of view of that in Vince McMahon, because he's like, well, give them a chance, and he doesn't tend to give more than one. But ultimately she says she just wants to see more of this, and to be honest, who could disagree with that? The WWE women's divisions have been fantastic. Like literally across the board, some of the best wrestling's coming from the women, and even as far down obviously as NXT, where the women's division is absolutely ridiculous that you could all be fed into and then ultimately left off the card for the main roster, because that's how things work in WWE. Isn't that right, Adam Cleary?
That is right, and you put the question there, who would argue with Alexa Bliss saying that more women should be headlining in WWE? Not me, that's for absolutely certain. And while that is interesting, Adam Nicholas, would you like to know what's even more interesting than that?
There's been some very interesting stuff so far, but
there's so much going on at the minute. Have you been on Twitter anytime recently? I know I have, and while I was on there, I saw two former WWE tag teams getting the old shovels out, going back about a year into history, and burying one of, let's face it, the single worst shows WWE ever put on. I am talking, of course, about the Raw 25th anniversary show, where they very cleverly shepherded every single over-the-top fanboy into a very special building, then treated them to like one Intercontinental Championship match, The Undertaker cutting the most nonsensical rambling promo I've ever seen in my life, and then, of course, it ended with the Revival getting the burial of all burials, because DX, they were out, the Clique, they were out, and then Finn Balor came out with Anderson and Gallows, and they all got to hit their finishes on the Revival, and we were all like, this doesn't seem to build to the future particularly well. Too sweet me, bro. And of course, this boiled over on Twitter, where Anderson and Dax? There's too many names. They were talking about this, and they basically pointed out that this was the biggest missed opportunity in pro wrestling history, in their opinion. Hashtag it. And apparently Dax, he went backstage after the show when everyone was high-fiving in the ring and punched a brick wall. They made fun of the fact that they are still 50-50 in WWE, spoke that they have incredible hate for 5 certain people, but will not mention who just yet. They decided to get together on the Talking Shop podcast, and they're going to do it. They're going to get some bottles of wine out, and they're going to go to town on this and the men behind the scenes that made it happen. Now, I'm a big believer that, the job just is what it is and you've got to move on, and the greatest revenge you can have is living a happy, successful life and entering into a critically acclaimed feud with the Young Bucks. But if they're going to get into it, if they're really going to get into it, I will tune into that. Oh boy, will I tune into that.
Listen, who isn't going to say no to a big, old, tall cup of tea from the boys who have, oh, look at that, as if by magic, perfectly timed, didn't even plan that there. And I mean, I'm not going to say no to that. I like wrestlers who go off and just go and achieve their dreams, but I'm also here for some shooting on men who deserved, and women where necessary, who deserve to be shot on. But most, let's be honest, it's the arsehole men. Anyway, speaking of arsehole men and how they got a talent who couldn't be bothered to be there anymore, they got rid of a woman who was called Ariane Andrew. That's the worst segue I've ever done. But still, let's talk about how
that's
the biggest differences between AEW and WWE. Obviously, she was recently on AEW TV. She was on the Deadly Draw tournament where she was partnered up with Nyla Rose. They unfortunately did not get the victory. They were against another ex-NXT wrestler in Tainara Conti and Anna Jay, who went through in the end. But Ariane's been talking about the differences between the two. She was on the Wrestling Inc.'s daily podcast and has had the following to say. Imagine this, Adam Cleary, given everything we've just spoken about there, imagine this being the nugget of wisdom that none of us could have predicted at all, totally, honestly. It says, WWE was more of a competitive environment where there's only a few spots available. AEW, however, has a how do we work together to make sure you put on the best show sort of vibe going on with it. She says where the wrestlers seem more focused on elevating each other regardless of card position. And on top of that, she said, it's like this is a team effort, because if we don't work as a team, then how do we put on a show if people are on different pages? So, and she also said, I've always been a huge advocate of stuff like that, which seems like being an AEW might be a really good fit for that. But I can't believe right about now that she's suggesting that WWE would not be the kind of environment that would want everybody to grow together, move the bar up in the same pace, and all get their sort of satiate their creative needs, Adam Cleary.
Satiate?
Yeah.
Bloody hell, book club's paying off, isn't it? Dear me. I, for one, am absolutely astounded to hear that a company that has spent 10 years hoovering up every single available marketable talent in the entire world makes it quite difficult and competitive for people to get the necessary TV time in which they require to grow. But my astounding revelations to one side, I'm sure you've got plenty of your own, so let us know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But in the meantime, I've been Adam Cleary. This has been Housewife's favourite, Adam Nicholas. This has been your quick fire good after news, and we will, what will we do? When will we see them?
Never.
Oh, I would have said soon, but that works too. Goodbye.